Welcome to the August 1st meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I'd like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or a group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item and 4 people against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak. At this point, please begin summarizing your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission and not to the applicant or the audience. And please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I'll then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into the deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application. Results of the voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or to call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and planned unit developments. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making final decisions. Please turn off your cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. Jennifer Denson, Cart Blackwell, Shirley Sessions, Mr. Alan Cameron.
Here.
Taylor Atchison.
Here.
Matt Anderson. Nick Amberger.
Here.
Bess Rich. Don Hembry.
Here.
Jay Stubbs. Bill Goodloe.
Here.
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me just a moment. Okay, we have got a quorum for voting on all items except for number 1 and number 11, where there are members of the Planning Commission that will need to recuse on those. So numbers 1 and 11 can be heard today. If you're here to speak for or against, you are welcome to speak, but it will not be able to be voted on until August the 15th. So I am,
Well, we're here against it, would it be appropriate to just continue it to August the 15th?
Number 1 and 11 will be continued until the next meeting, and we'll have a forum. So y'all can leave now, or you can wait and bring down the talk. You can speak today, or just come back to the 15th. You prefer you just come back to the 15th?
Yes.
the same goes for number 1. If you are here to speak in favor of number 1 or against it, you'll be able to speak today, but we will not be able to vote on it. So,
And we apologize. This happens about once a year where we just don't have a quorum. People have to recuse themselves. We apologize. Hate y'all have to come back again in 2 weeks, but that just, sometimes it happens.
we will reconvene at 2 o'clock on the 15th. The commission apologizes to you for not being able to hear it or call it today. I would like to poll the commissioners on numbers 2 through 10 and make sure that there will be no further necessity for recusal so that we can all be here and vote on. So we will hear 2 through 10 today. If you are present to speak for or against 1 or 11, you will be able to do that today if you want to be heard. So let's start. I'll call 1. So on application number 1, which is the Midtown Park South, if you are here and you want to speak today because for some reason you don't want to come back or are unable to come back on the 15th, you're welcome to speak for it or against it today, or you can come back on the 15th and speak for it or against it. On number 11, which is the application on Spring Hill, the north side of Spring Hill Avenue, the same applies. If you are here to speak for or against number 11, which is the Spring Hill Avenue, the Spring Hill Animal Clinic subdivision, we'd love to hear from you today if you'd like to speak, or you may speak for or against it on the 15th when it is called again. Does everybody understand? We will not be able to vote on either one of those applications. But if you are present and would like to speak for or against either one of those, you may do so. So if there is anyone present for number 1 that would like to speak for it, you may come and do so now. If there's anyone present for number 2 and you'd like to speak against it, you may do so now. I mean, number 1, I'm sorry. That's 3168 Midtown Park. We will hear that on the 15th. The new subdivision application for 104 North Warren Street. It has been recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? In agreement with all the recommendations? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to it? We will move on to number 3, which is 450 St. Emmanuel Street. Applicant present and in agreement. Are you in agreement with the recommendations? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone to speak against it? Application number 4, 2500 and 2600 Burden Lane.
We're in agreement with most all of the staff recommendations. We've asked for some clarity on number and they're asking for a note on the final plat regarding access along Burden Lane. We recognize this is a 30-foot right of way and presents some problems at this large site Burden on. But we believe that if we're coming back in for re-subdivision, have to be addressed by this commission now, so no on the final plat.
Excuse me, Mr. Watkins, can you wait just a minute until those doors get closed? Having a hard time hearing you. Okay.
So what I was pointing out was the staff has recommended a placement on the plat of a note regarding coming back for re-subdivision until Burden Lane is widened. And we feel like a note on the plat is a little overkill, because we have to come back before you guys anyway to get that re-subdivision, and the notes are there. So we would ask for that note to be, that condition to be removed. If the staff is unhappy with that request, then we would like it to be a broader statement, so that it read something along the lines of placement on a note on the final plat, stating no further re-subdivision is allowed until the lot has frontage on a roadway meeting city standards. We don't necessarily want to tie the Burton Lane, because there may be additional points of access that could be used at a later date. But again, our preference would be to have that note removed on that.
Okay.
Can we get
questions from the
staff's
commission?
opinion on that?
We're agreeable to option number 2.
I could tell by the look on your face.
I don't play cards.
All right, thank you. Any further questions from the commissioners? Well, everybody hang on just a minute. I am,
Done, we can't undo it.
well, there, okay. I appreciate all y'all coming back, but we have already stated that we are postponing it until the 15th. So both of those will be heard.
Hold on, Liz, hold on.
Okay, hang on.
I say,
Thank you for being patient with us while we figure out what we're up to.
Y'all are good. Was there anybody else here? Good, but they're all, we know they're all here.
Everyone here for 1 and 15, 1 and 11 are
On
here.
number 11, on the Spring Hill Avenue, I know y'all are in opposition. Are all of y'all still here, or did some of y'all leave? Everybody's here. And for the applicant, everybody's still here? Then, I mean, all parties are here, seems, then
And all
by
parties are
agreement,
here
we
on
can
number
go.
1 as well?
we'll,
Mr. Anderson, everybody's here for number 1 as well?
yes, yes.
Well,
So let's finish,
I had not called
let's finish
for-
number 4, and then we can go back to number 1.
Okay, we had left off with Mr. Watkins at the microphone. Were there any questions from any commissioners for Mr. Watkins? No. Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of application number 4? Is anyone here to speak in opposition to it? Thank you very much. Now, we are going to go out of order. Since everybody's here now and we have a quorum, we're going to move back to number 1, which is 3168 Midtown Park South. Mr. Goodloe is recused on number 1. But we do have a quorum to hear number 1. Is the applicant present? Yes, sir.
David Wilkins, representing Branch Towers and T-Mobile, P.O. Box 1038, Gulf Shores, Alabama 36547.
Thank you.
Y'all have already heard this case on application on June the 20th, and again, we agree with the staff recommendation to approve, and the independent study report. I've reviewed it, and we agree with the conclusions in there. So
Thank you.
if you have any questions,
Any questions from the commissioner for the applicant? No, sir. I want to make sure that all commissioners have gotten a copy of the report. That was, did you get one? Everybody got one? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of application number 1? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to that?
My name's Gaylord Lyon. I'm here to oppose the construction of a 150-foot cell tower on Midtown Park South, a subdivision, commercial subdivision of single-story office buildings, very little landscaping. This cell tower, 150 feet, is double the size, height of the telephone poles. There are transmission lines going through part of the subdivision. Mr. Wilkins was talking about this independent study. We were held over from last meeting so y'all could do an independent study. We got it a couple hours ago. Nobody's had really time to look at it. But I've noticed, first of all, it's from a company in Maryland. They're not local. They didn't come to Mobile. They said, we reviewed the application and supporting engineering documents. Well, the application and engineering documents were given to y'all by T-Mobile. Nothing's going to be on there that's derogatory. It's not going to tell you another site they could go by. Blacksburg Washburn said they could go behind Rite Aid. You can go by Sidney Phillips. There are other sites. It doesn't say, you know, the type of subdivision it's going into. It doesn't say it's violating about 4 or 5 covenants in the neighborhood. And violating covenants in the neighborhood, the property owners do have a right to go to court on violation of rights in the neighborhood. So I'm not so sure that I would consider this an independent study. You know, I don't know if these people in Maryland have ever done business with T-Mobile before, but I would bet they have. Second thing is the subdivision, the covenants. Everybody has I think, a copy of the covenants. I have some extra copies right here, which I will give to y'all to look at, but it talks about landscaping, fencing, hiding air conditioning units, poles, how you've got to hide all that stuff. This is a 150-foot cell tower with room for 3 bays on top. It doesn't belong in this neighborhood. We have a petition that y'all have signed by 14 property owners. These are owner-occupants of this subdivision. The subdivision, y'all probably know, but it's located behind the new Bojangles. It's just a loop, Dolphin, behind new Bojangles. All of these people signed the petition. They're opposed. 2 or 3 people did not sign it. And I know them. They do business with the developer. They said, hey, we're not for it, but we're not signing the petition because, you know, we've done interior completions. We've sold them property, you know. So everybody that has no conflict as an owner sign this. I've got some pictures of the subdivision. I'd given y'all some big pictures. How can I get these to look at? The site, you can't really see it, but this is the office building. It's going to be in the back parking lot of this office building. It's about 150 feet from my building, and y'all got the plot plan, I believe, that I gave to you earlier, but it could fall on 5 different property owners. It's that tall. The lot's 100 feet wide, 150-foot cell tower plus antenna on top, and it could fall on different lots, including Tommy Clement's building and some other buildings here. It's just not the right place for it. You know, the developer's going to get a nice rental income every month. He's not anywhere near, you know, in this subdivision and occupy this subdivision, and I just feel like it's the wrong place. And so does everybody else in the subdivision, and there are other sites for it, which they haven't identified, which we have. I'm done, though.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon.
Any questions?
Any
Mr. Lyon,
questions
just a
from the
quick
commissioners?
question, comment, clarification. Maybe this might be for staff, but the issue of the height of the tower and the clearance required that's being addressed through the Board of Adjustment, correct? So that's not anything that we look at.
The Board of Adjustment addressed sorry, the Board of Adjustment addressed the setback requirements. The tower height is in the ordinance, and the proposal is within the ordinance. The board approved that variance as well.
Okay, so that's not a fact, the height of the tower
Correct.
and the risk of it falling on someone, that's not a factor that we can really look at because the Board of Adjustments is addressing that concern.
Correct. They've approved the height of the tower.
Okay. And just for clarification, I'm sorry, just for clarification too, the subdivision ordinances and guidelines, that's not anything that we can look at either as far as making a decision for this application. Okay.
Y'all's opposition is solely based on aesthetics, is that?
Wait, sorry.
Your opposition is based on the aesthetics of the tower?
That, there are other sites for it. For
But I
the
mean,
last
what-
month, I've been looking around town, I couldn't find a site where a tower's in a subdivision. It's all in the woods, you got them behind Dreamland, behind Mobile Gas, behind big shopping centers. You just don't have them in the middle of a single-story office complex. It's just better sites. It's just good for T-Mobile, I guess, but not for anybody else.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yes, ma'am. So, part of the contention at the last meeting was based on whether denying the application to be able to put the cell phone tower in this location would have been denying service to adequate levels of service to T-Mobile users. Is that correct? I mean, somebody brought that up as being a potential situation with the FCC or something. Or am I just, remembering something else?
The city code requires the applicant to allege or explain at the time that the application is made if a denial of the application would prohibit meaningful access to the marketplace. Yes.
Okay, so with that in mind, he says there are other locations, but I think there being other locations is less material than whether there were other cell phone towers, within a certain radius. That was another thing, right? So are there other cell phone towers that were applicable to the use within a radius?
The standard in the telecommunications ordinance is a 1/2 mile radius from the site. There are, according to the applicant and the engineering report, no other usable antenna support structures within a 1/2 mile radius of the site.
Can I add one thing too? I rode around for T-Mobile phone within a mile radius, had 4 and 5 dots most of the time. So they're saying they need more coverage. I don't know how you can get better than 4 or 5 dots. Every now and then there's 3 dots.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. Any further questions from the commission? Thank you so much. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition?
I'm Jim Fernandez, law firm Fernandez, Crane and Combs, and the opponents have hired me to speak against it. The question, sir, of the variance is before the Honorable Michael Youngpeter, Circuit Judge. He will be acting as a Board of Adjustment and will decide whether or not the applicants have met the necessary criteria of unnecessary hardship, which they won't be able to meet because they are already putting the property to a legitimate B3 use by renting commercial space. We're comfortable with that, but we'll see what happens. I'm not the judge. I have a handout for you. If you don't mind getting that in front of you, I would be grateful. The first page is a copy of your zoning map. It's just a 4-page handout, little star where the proposed tower is, if everybody's got that. Understand that the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, forbids a tower in residential areas. If you will look, this tower is a baseball throw from a huge R1 residential area. It is also just a short distance from a huge R3 area. They couldn't put it anywhere in there. They can, with your permission, put it in this B3 zone. But the only place under the zoning ordinance that they have a right to put it is in an industrial place. Now, the next thing I've given you is the actual text of your zoning ordinance, the part of it that deals with telecommunication towers and facilities. And I've taken the trouble of highlighting it for you, the 7 criteria that you should apply in making your decision today. And the last thing I have given you are the 2 pages from the T-Mobile and the Sprint websites, because as you may know, a couple of weeks ago, the United States Department of Justice approved the merger of T-Mobile and Sprint. So I go to the T-Mobile website, I plug in this address, and I am told by them that they have excellent signal there. Cell reception outdoors and in most homes and big buildings. I get the same piece of information off of Sprint's website, and I'm also told that they have excellent coverage in this area by the and they even have theirs verified by some independent commercial, entity. Now, with that said, I've used 3 minutes. I will cede the rest of my time to you and ask you kindly, please read your own ordinance before you decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this application? Any questions by the commissioners? Ms. Pappas, are we at this point to move on to number 5, or do we need to address? Mr. Anderson's able to stay?
Go through the agenda.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sorry about the mix-up on all of this, but we will get through it. We are now going to move to number 5, which is 3551 Alba Club Road, which has been recommended for tentative approval. Applicant present and in agreement with the recommendations. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this application? Thank you. Number 6, 255 North Jackson Street. Been recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? And in agreement, as indicated agreement. Is anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is anyone here to speak in opposition to it? Thank you. We will now move on to number 7. 5713 Old Shell Road has been recommended for approval.
Frank Dagley, 5865 Falls Church Road. Everything's been approved. We're in agreement with everything. However, I talked to the staff before the meeting where there's one minor change in the PUD, and since they're site-specific, they recommended that I read this into the record. We had said we were going to have 106 parking spaces, but we're only going to have 105. There are only 98 required, so it's really not a problem, but just for the record, there's going to be one less than we had originally planned for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dagley. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is anyone here to speak in opposition to it? Thank you. We'll move on to number 8. Layton Place. It's been recommended for holdover. Applicant in agreement with the holdover?
Hello, Rick Twilley. I would like to clarify a few things. This is not to be a private road, and I'd ask that we could bring this over to the next meeting. There is a gate that is in question, And we've actually talked to the zoning, and I believe that we can look at doing this other gate as they've done at the Arbors, which would be an electric gate that would stay open most of the time and only close at certain hours, but it would actually give permission, you know, for any person to come up to open at any given time.
The staff has recommended that it be held over to September 5th. Are you requesting it just be held over till August 15th?
I talked to Bert about that.
Has the subdivision been submitted?
Yes, that, actually, he's bringing that, I'm bringing that in, yes. I can bring that then if that can bring, instead of doing a full holdover.
Well, no, I mean, what I'm asking is, has the required subdivision application for this unit been submitted so that
I think it's due Monday, is it not?
But
Is
that
right?
is for the meeting in
Okay,
September.
we can do that.
And that's the reason for the request for the holdover until then.
Okay, we can do that.
All right.
All right, we're good. Any other
So,
questions?
yeah, Madam Chair, so you said there would be a gate on a public street?
Yes. But it's, y'all have approved one back in November, I believe it was, in the Arbors. And it's actually something where I think y'all are open to trying, see if we can have it where it's all automatically opens to any car. And it'll be open most of the time.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Twillie. This will most likely be held over.
Yes. All
Is
right.
there anyone else here to speak in favor or in opposition to this? Thank you very much. Number 9, 50 Cochrane Causeway, applicant present and has indicated agreement with the recommendations. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is anyone here to speak in opposition to it? Thank you. We will move on to number 11. I am recused on number 11.
10.
Oh, we're on 10, I'm sorry. Yeah, it has been that kind of day, hasn't it? We'll call number 10, which is 1643 Varner Drive. Applicant present and in agreement with the recommendations. He has indicated as such. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of that application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to it? Thank you. We have already covered we're going to move to number 11. I'm recused on this. Mr. Hamburger, please take over. Thank you.
Okay. We'll hear number 11 now, the north side of Spring Hill Avenue, 105 feet west of Knoll Street, extending to the west side of Knoll Street. Is the applicant present?
B.J. Lyon for the applicant, 3601 Spring Hill Business Park Drive. I'm going to speak to the zoning, and then William Latta will speak to the PUD in the subdivision. I represent Dr. Mary Edmonds and Dr. Mandy Alston, who are veterinarians and want to operate and construct a small animal clinic on Lot 1 of the proposed subdivision. The lots 1 and 2, from your plat that you see, are on Spring Hill Avenue, and there will be a change. There won't be access through Spring Hill, from Lot 3 to through lots 1 and 2, but rather through Lot 4, and William will speak to that. St. Ignatius Church is the owner of the property, is elected to sell it because it doesn't need it. Property's 5.4 acres and zoned residential R1. We believe that the zoning is appropriate for lots 1 and 2. The staff recommends denial on the basis that we haven't proven their existence of changes in the area and need to increase the number of sites. Now, the staff report, of course, notes that the ordinance allows changes in the ordinance to be anticipated as the city grows. And Section 64.9 of the zoning ordinance allows a change when, or rezoning when changed conditions in a particular area make the rezoning necessary and desirable, and or a need to increase the number of sites available to business. One is needed. We think both are here. There's growth in the area and development of Spring Hill and McGregor. If you'll turn to the handout that I gave you and go to tab 2,
you will see that the site is catty-corner, pertinent to a number of B2 areas, which are the corner of North McGregor and Spring Hill Avenue, which, as you know, the city or the Village of Spring Hill has spent some money building a roundabout, and the B2 corner was here last session where it was re-subdivided into one lot. That was actually 7 residential lots at one point, which in the past have been rezoned to B2. And so page 2 shows you that the B2 corner is white, I'm sorry, page 3 in your 5 in your handout. B2 White Spunner, and you see the Special District Commercial. And then you come on down North McGregor and you see Special District Quinelli. Well, those are Village of Spring Hill districts which permit business use similar to B1 or B2. So page 6 shows you the photographs of the B2 sites in the area that we've marked on the map. Page 7 shows you those sites. In the lower left is Black Door Studio, which is Mr. Quinelli's building on North McGregor. Page 8 shows you the location of all of these and the B2 zoning across the street, and McGregor Avenue with the blue highlighting. Page 9 shows you the building that Mr. Quinelli has already built. That's the first building built under the Village of Spring Hill concept, and he owns the home next door all the way down to Mordecai. I'm sorry, all the way down to Shipes. And page 10 will show you what he has planned for just that block. And he owns the remainder of the next block except for one parcel all the way down to Mordecai. So there's a lot going on in that area that's commercial.
1 minute.
And based on that, and go to tab 3 just for a second. That is, page 11, of course, is the B2 site for the White Spunner outlined in yellow. If you look at page 12, you'll see the site and how many lots that is on Spring Hill. And then on 13, you will see that there were a total of 7 lots that were formerly residential that are now B2. And there's actually one lot to the east. If you look back on page 12, you'll see there's an additional lot that's also B2 that is actually a residence. So we think that change conditions in the area, we think that obviously the traffic is a problem on Spring Hill. No one's going to build a residential home on what is now lots, what we propose as lots 1 and 2 is for B1. And there's a lot going on, and we believe that based on change conditions that this is a rezoning that you should vote for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. Questions by commissioners?
Mr. Lyons, could you address the issue of access to lot number, is it number 3 that does not have access?
Well, and let me say one thing else. If you read the face of the staff report, it says B2, but then if you come on down, it says B1. We are not seeking B2, only B1. This is going to be a office type, just a use that's going to be lower intensive than B2. Mr. Latta will address that. So I think the staff has recommended that the access to Spring Hill be denied. There actually is an easement. If you look at the way the 2 lots were together, there's a dash line. There was to be a 50-foot permanent ingress and egress easement. But the staff is recommending, I think my clients are in agreement not to do that, but instead have the access through Lot 4 to Knowles Lane.
So you'd provide access to lot 3
Through Lot 4.
Through lot 4.
And he may that may become one lot. I'm not. He'll have to tell you that as an engineer.
To me, it would look like it'd be better off to go ahead and present it that way. That way you're showing access to that one large lot.
Well, and he will explain to you. We had a meeting with staff and we presented it the way we presented it based on what he was more or less what they discussed, okay. and we're willing to go do that now.
Any further questions by commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Okay, we'll hear from those that may be in favor of the applicant. Is there anybody here that would wish to speak in favor of the application? Name and address for the record, please.
William Latta, 3901 Spring Hill Avenue.
I first want to go into a little bit of the planning process that resulted in the current application and the layout. The goal was to provide a lot, obviously, for my client to build an animal clinic. But throughout the process, she was very adamant about protecting the neighbors' lots and not affecting them. So a few various things were done, such as keeping the B1 lots closer to Spring Hill Avenue, leaving the residential lot in the rear to limit exposure to the B1 lots and to protect the cemetery that's in the rear. And then the lot on Knowles was really cleaning up several non-standard lots, just combining them together on Knowles. Originally, traffic supported us having 2 curb cuts on Spring Hill. Instead of going with 2 curb cuts, we are limiting ourselves to 1 to try to limit the effect on the traffic along Spring Hill. So upon reviewing the staff report and the recommendation to provide a public street through lots 1 and 2 to lot 3, we found this is pretty much unfeasible. It would take up 40% of the available width of these 2 lots to provide a public street. We also looked into the recommendation for a flag lot, but that really caused some additional issues with other ordinances for all 3 lots. We received some conditions from the planning staff for if y'all were to approve this application, and one of the conditions is to provide or to convert that 50-foot easement to either a public street or a flag lot. We would rather instead provide that through Lot 4, which would keep the residential areas together, separate from the business lots. It provides for more continuity. We would also request that traffic put a condition on lots 1 and 2, limiting access to Spring Hill Avenue. We want to make sure that the business traffic does not go through Lot 4 and affect Knowles Lane and the neighbors.
Questions by commissioners?
I have a question for staff. In regards to the PUD, with this new change going through Lot 4, will we need a new drawing, or, I mean, is this something we can take at this time?
You can condition the PUD requiring the revised plan to be placed on file, showing the frontage for Lot 3 being to Knowles.
Thank you.
As a flagpole lot.
Correct. A minimum of 25 feet of frontage, which would allow Lot 4 to have 61 feet, which would be compliant.
And the house at the corner of Spring Hill Avenue and Knowles Street, 3800 Spring Hill Avenue, is that a single-family residential house? Church. Okay.
What about the other 4 lots?
As you progress westwardly along Spring Hill, adjacent to the property headed west, you have residential until you hit the offices just west of the projection of McGregor.
But the 4 lots going down Knowles, that's what I was referring to.
Oh, yes, headed northward on Knowles, you have 3 homes and then the 4th lot.
In the church, it only has access to Spring Hill Avenue? The parking, is it on site?
It appears to have both on the aerial.
To Knowles and Spring Hill?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Latta. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? Your name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Whitfield Edmonds. I grew up here in Mobile, went off to Auburn for veterinary school, came back home and have been practicing veterinary medicine here since I graduated. About 5 years ago, I was hired on at Spring Hill Animal Clinic, who is proposing the building on Lot 1. And this is my associate, Mandy Austin. The clinic has been in practice for over 10 years. We serve the community and the neighborhood, focusing on spays and neutering and full-service medicine. I just wanted to let everybody know that I am very sensitive to the neighbors and want to respect them and respect their quiet street that they have known. That's why we have dedicated a buffer zone around the front commercial properties of 10 feet with the required fencing by the city code, as well as a 20-foot buffer on the back Lot 3 residential area to provide them some seclusion and privacy, as well as particularly to provide privacy to the cemetery on the furthest borderline. So I just wanted to say thank you for your time and to please consider favorably the rezoning and the building of our clinic.
A question by commissioners?
Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Whitfield.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the application?
Good afternoon. My name's Rob Moreland. I'm the business manager at St. Ignatius Parish. We have determined that we're going to sell this property. It's not in our future to keep it, and I would expect that there will be change coming for a new owner to do with it however they wish to do. But it's not going to stay the way it is after a sale to another owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions by commissioners?
Mr. Moreland, when St. Ignatius bought the property, what was the future plan for the development of it?
That was before my time. That was in 2000. I don't know what the idea was, only that we're a landlocked parish, and it might have been just an opportunity that we took, but there's been no plans for it since the time we bought it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarification too, sir. Let me ask you real quick. On the, there's a lot on the other side, on the east side of Knowles. Is that St. Ignatius property as well? It's an open field.
Yes, it is. That's
Okay.
St. Ignatius property. We're probably the largest landowner on Knowles Lane.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions by commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Moreland. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of this application? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Please come down, ma'am. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Knowles Smith. I live at 912 Knowles Street. I was born on Knowles Street, and I still live there. As president of the Sandtown Community Action Group, I represent the residents of Knowles Street and other concerned citizens of Sandtown. We are opposed to the rezoning of property ZON 972 and the 3 others. Water and drainage are of major concerns. There is a natural downward slope of the property which drains into the cemetery, the Rising Sun Cemetery. There is already a water retention problem. Graves have been there since the 1800s. The water problem would only increase with the removal of trees, the addition of buildings, concrete, and pavement. Traffic. Getting onto Spring Hill Avenue is a daily battle for the residents of Knowles Street. During peak travel times, it may take 3 to 5 minutes before it is safe to turn onto Spring Hill Avenue. Increased traffic from employees and patrons would only add to the traffic jams. The Sandtown community has been told that an environmental study has not been done. If one has since been completed, what are the results? The problem with drainage will increase and possibly create additional hazards for our neighborhood. What would happen to the underground springs located on the property? This property is surrounded by all residences. A residential lot on Knoll Street is included in the proposed rezoning. The lot is sandwiched between two homes. Residents have been told there is no intent to build a home on the lot. The lot size will be permanently altered to accommodate this rezoning, possibly affecting resale value as a residential lot for a future home in our neighborhood. The proposed animal clinic would be located next door to an African American historical church that has been in existence for over 140 years, and it is a vital part of our Sandtown community and the Knoll Street residents. Barking dogs are an issue. There is no barrier that can block the sound of barking dogs. Several homes would be located next door to the clinic. Neighbors should not have to deal with this nuisance. There is a request for the rezoning of the property, which was home to Mrs. Ernestine Allen family for over 90 years. No specifics or details have been provided as to what will be built on the remaining property were the rezoning be approved. For sure, we do not have the financial resources of the doctors and the real estate investors, but we are tax-paying citizens and we contribute to our community in various ways. We deserve to maintain our peaceful and tranquil neighborhood, which has been in existence for over 150 years. We are in agreement with the Planning Commission staff recommendation of denial of ZON 972 and the 3 others. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knowles. Questions by commissioners?
Engineering, can you speak to the potential drainage issues that could occur on this, if this lot were developed?
If the property is developed, it'll be required to meet the drainage, storm drainage ordinance that the city has, which requires them to provide detention so that the proposed runoff from the site is no more than what runs off the site now.
Thank you.
Any further questions by commissioners? Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition to this application? Come down, sir, please. Just one at a time, please. And your name and address for the record, please, sir. You had somebody else coming behind you.
What are you saying?
You had somebody else coming behind you, so we just take y'all one at a time if we can, please.
You see before me?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Just your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Name and
Your name and address for the record.
Roosevelt Edwards, Shipes Lane.
Thank you.
And as it's been spoken before, the environmental impact statement that we talked about at the meeting, which there was a presentation for, has not been provided to any of the neighborhood of the Spring Hill community. That statement, as was talked about before, was for water management, which is a huge concern going forward, especially for drainage, not in the drainage on that property, but also the adjacent properties going toward the creek. Those adjacent properties being the cemetery that was spoken of earlier. There's also was the historical aspect in the cemetery, but there's a, I'm not sure how this works here on property 4. Is that to be used as an access area to properties 3 and 2 and 1, or what exactly is supposed to be happening there on lot 4?
Lot 4 would be a residential lot. access to Lot 3, but not to 1 and 2. Lot 1 and 2 would not have access to Knowles Street.
So Lot 3 is only accessible through the cemetery?
No, through Lot 4 to Knowles Street.
Lot 3, which is residential,
Correct.
Lot 4 now will be commercial.
No, sir, residential. Lot 4 and Lot 3 would remain as it is. The only change is to 1 and 2.
So there's egress through Lot 4 to Lot 3.
That's the new proposal, yes, sir. It's not shown on that, but that's the proposal.
When will that be completed? To be
If-
shown
if-
on that
If
on the
it's
diagram?
approved, it would be shown on the final plat, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We're saying that because Knoll Street in itself is not a large access street for a lot of traffic. And of course, there's, as we speak today, there's water management area efforts on that, which has been historically, it's a mess. As was a traffic management issue, which is also a concerning mess and which people are concerned about. So, of course, many of us stand in denial of this particular petition, but that's my concern going forward.
Okay. Other questions by the commissioners? Thank you, sir. Next speaker in opposition.
I have a question for the environmental impact study. Do we require, is that part of the zoning?
Sir, however, I believe engineering could possibly give you some information regarding any requirements that are possible via ADM or the Corps of Engineers if there are wetlands.
Okay, so it's specific to the diagram that we have here from the 2019 flood insurance rate map showing our contour lines. We also show the wetlands in which would be impacted. But we also show the contour, we show the drop-off for that particular area that would be impacted that I spoke of earlier. So that's why we talked about that environmental impact statement being a major concern for the community.
I guess my question is who's requiring the environmental impact study? Why is that coming up?
Via the zoning ordinance, that would not be a requirement.
Okay.
If I may, the process does not require what's referred to as an environmental impact statement. What's required is permitting from the other regulatory bodies that might have oversight. So if there's wetlands that are impacted, they do have to acquire a Corps of Engineers permit. If there's floodplain issues that are associated with their development, those issues have to be addressed via the permit. Those are all things that come in as part of their permits to the engineering department, which are reviewed and taken on consideration, as to what they submit.
I understand the concerns, considerations. So who would notify those particular assets that need to have that information that these particular properties are going to impact the wetlands in other areas?
Well, if it's wetlands, again, those are processes that go through the Corps of Engineers.
In other words, that's not presented today, is what I'm saying.
That's correct. Yeah, that is correct. Yes, sir.
And when would that be presented?
Well, that would be a process for which the applicant would engage the Corps of Engineers for that type of permit. Before the city would issue permits, we would require that all those permits were in hand.
The applicant has to engage the Corps of Engineering, and when would you expect that to happen?
I can't answer that. That would be part of their process by which they would move forward. I mean, in developing any property, they've got numbers of steps that they have to go through. So addressing wetlands can be one of them if the property is impacted by wetlands.
Yes, my concern is that the applicant would want to walk down that street, but why isn't there oversight from the committee?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, sir?
In other words, you're expecting the applicant to do this forthright on their own.
We don't expect them, they have to do it.
They have to do it,
To get
yes,
a
sir.
building
They have to do
permit
it.
from the city of Mobile after they go through, if this board approves it, before the city can approve a building permit, they would have to go get the ADM permit and any other permits from any other state or federal agencies because of the environmental laws. So that's part of the process. They don't have to do it before they come here. But
Okay.
it would be done before building permits
Terrific.
issued.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, sir.
My concern was I thought maybe you had oversight within that process.
No, sir.
Completely
No,
up
sir.
to ADM and the Corps of Engineers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear the next.
Good evening, Reverend Nathaniel Wilder. I'm a representative from the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, the Mobile District. Presiding Elder Ronald Butler, he's not able to be here, so he sent me, I'm his assistant, to let this board know that we are in connection with this organization, the Sandtown Community Action Group. We met with them on last week. And that community has been out there for so many years, so peaceful. The church has been there 145 years. We're concerned about traffic. We're concerned about noise. And so we stand in support of that community. We want this rezoning rejected, and we will be fighting with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir. We'll hear one more in opposition. Your name and address,
Thank you.
please, sir.
My name is Robert Brown, 949 Knowles Lane. I am a part of the Sand Hills community. I just want to say a couple of things. I believe that there were some things that were presented to you concerning this community that probably aren't on any documents that you have. This is not something that you can go in a room and talk about, but it's something that's in the heart of the people who live in that community. This is not just a street. This is a community. This is an area where slaves have been buried in those cemeteries. The church was there. There was a school there that slaves went to school in. And oftentimes, those kind of concerns for the people in those communities get overlooked when there's something that we want to build or something to change the community. But we believe that because we are contributors to the city, we're taxpayers, we should be represented by our commissioners, and we believe that if you open your heart and listen to us, there are other areas in this city where this thing could be built. East of St. Ignatius, there's a lot that's been for sale probably for the last 20 years. And I don't know if that's enough land, but it's already blocked in. And for some reason, they overlooked it. But we hope that you will hear our hearts today. We're not trying to deny progress in our area, but we believe that what has happened with this community needs to stay intact. It's a quiet community. There's no crime there. It's a peaceful community. It's a place to raise children. It's a great place to live, and we don't want it disturbed. And we ask you to consider our suggestions today. We're in total opposition of this rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there questions by commissioners? Thank you. Would the applicant like to come down? I'm sorry, sir. We've heard four. We allow 4 for, and 4 against. If we can, applicant will come down.
William Latta, 3901 Spring Hill Avenue. I just want to go through and address some of the concerns that were brought forth. Drainage is obviously a concern for the neighbors. We have a recent drainage study for the Knowles system that shows there's adequate capacity for our stormwater through that system. There is a slope back towards the cemetery, but developing the front half and taking that out to Knowles should actually divert stormwater from going that direction. It should help the situation there. By taking the stormwater that would be traveling down the slope towards the cemetery and routing it over to the Knowles system where it would be handled through the city MS4. As far as traffic, we're proposing 1 curb cut on Spring Hill Avenue. Any development that would go in there would have at least 1 curb cut there. We're not proposing any change there. The environmental study, I think there's some misconceptions with that, and I think the main concern is still drainage. As far as environmental studies go, we've seen no evidence that the soil is contaminated with any spills or anything like that, and unless we find something, we don't believe there's a need for a true environmental study analyzing the soil. Of course, we'll have the geotechnical studies and everything to support our development as needed. The lot on Knowles and the residential lot in the rear, we're proposing them to remain R1. They are currently R1. They will stay R1. There's no change there. There's currently access to Knowles. We're not changing that. As for the church, we held a meeting with the neighbors. I spoke personally with the reverend of the church. We talked about coordinating their schedule to make sure that any construction activities or any activities from our site were scheduled in conjunction with their services, with their Bible studies, with anything to make sure we limit any disturbance to the church. The Knowles Lane is indeed a peaceful road. The applicant is proposing buffers much greater than anything required in the ordinance to try to keep that same feeling in the neighborhood. She is going above and beyond in that respect. In addition, currently there's no plans for the rear residential lot 3. It will remain as it is. We're not planning to go in and clear it. We're very mindful that the cemetery is directly behind it. We don't want to cause any adverse impacts to it at all, believe me. Wetlands, you know, if we have to handle wetlands, we will absolutely handle them through the proper Corps permits. That's standard. We do that on all our sites. As far as the timeline, there's a 1-year expiration on the PUD and the planning approval, so we would have to address it pretty quickly. It's not something that will linger for years and years and years. This approval would expire. That's most of the concerns I heard, unless there's something I did not address.
There was a mention about noise, dog barking, and, I mean, are all the animals going to be contained inside the building, or are there going to be runs outside for them, and how is the facility?
I'm going to, because I'm not a veterinarian, I'm going to let her speak more
if
to
you would,
that.
please come down.
As far as the times they'll be out there. But we are still including the buffer, a wooded buffer, to try to reduce any noise from.
The design of our building is at the lower floor, which is built into the slope of the land in order to help buffer the noise, is where the kennels will be. Right now, there is 14 dog kennels. Only 7 will have access outside, limited to, an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, and an hour in the evening. The open area in the rear of the building is for dog walking, which will be leash dogs only, so that's a brief walk. Our hours of operation are 8 to 5:30. Staff leaves, dogs are up. Monday through Friday, and we won't be open on the weekends.
So you said there'd be seven of these things?
Seven dog runs, which are a fenced-in,
Yeah.
smaller fenced-in area attached to the building where the dog can have access in and out.
So there will be 7 of those dogs that are always facing outside?
Not always. So the doors, you can open the door to give them access to the outside certain times of the day. That's controlled by us. So we would open, let them go out in the morning, maybe for an hour, weather permitting. It's not too hot and not raining, which this is Mobile.
So on the weekends when they're unattended?
So on the weekends, we do plan on having limited boarding, less than 25% of our revenue, or services. And we will have staff that come in to walk the dogs, again, morning and evening. And typically, that takes an hour, max 2 hours, depending, on who's there.
But the concern that the first speaker from Sandtown Community
Yes.
Action Group mentioned, she was talking about just, the fact that if these dogs are out and barking on the weekend, you just said y'all aren't going to be there except whatever staff comes in to walk them or whatever.
Correct.
So are those dogs going to be exposed to the point where the neighbors will be able to hear them easily on the weekends?
They will be inside.
Okay.
But
Got it.
Okay. Any further questions by commissioners?
anything else?
Thank you.
Were those the only questions being entertained? Yes, sir.
You have a follow-up, Mr. Lyons? Or are you done? Okay. That will.
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Knowles, could you come back down for just a second, please?
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned, the gentleman here mentioned that he had met with the community previously in the planning stages. Were you at that meeting?
I was, but it wasn't in the planning stage. It was completed. The planning had done.
Right. Okay, all right.
I was there. I was in attendance.
Okay. I just wanted to get your opinion, because this area is obviously growing, and a decision is going to be made at some point in time as to how this area is developed. It's not going to stay residential, I don't think, with Spring Hill being like it is. So, I mean, we're just trying to find a compromise here that will meet the needs for the community and development, and then also meet, you know, you and your neighbors' needs as far as trying to protect your neighborhood and the history that's there with that. So, what are some of the types of developments that you would like to see on this property? I mean, it's not going to stay residential, I don't think.
Okay. Is there any reason that it couldn't stay residential? Dan Alkane had a drawing showing a street down the middle with beautiful homes, trees, and backyards
I
for
think
that
primarily,
property.
yes, ma'am. I think primarily because of where it's located, the value of the land. Another possibility you might could see in the future that this doesn't go through is apartments or high-density
Yeah.
residential. And I think that would be more impactful on the peace and quiet of your neighborhood than a small business.
That particular small business, I'm
Okay.
not sure I am in
Okay,
agreement
yeah.
with that, sir.
I agree, and that's why I just want to get your
Okay.
thoughts and try to, because you seem to have the pulse of the neighborhood and the community, so just
And
want to
we
get
are
your.
a tight-knit
we
neighborhood.
respect
And
that,
it's
and that's
that
great.
it's not that we're opposed to the growth. We aren't. I've been there 70 years,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
hopefully I'll stay there a few more.
Right.
So we know things are going to grow.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're not opposed to that. We are opposed to this rezoning and the animal clinic.
Okay, well, thank you for your
Yes,
input.
sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our applications. We'll now move into our deliberation session. I will turn the chair back over to Ms. Latham.
Number 1, 3168 Midtown Park.
I'd like to get just another refresher from our legal counsel on this. Obviously, again, the variance for the clearance, that's being addressed by the Board of Adjustment, so that's not an issue for us. You know, obviously, I'd like to be able to deny the application, but we have to be able to do that in a way that meets within our ordinance and our requirements. And I'm not really seeing to where we have any grounds to stand on to deny this application.
The Board of Zoning Adjustment addressed the height and the setback, and by so doing, those are not issues before the Planning Commission in connection with its approval right now. In the memorandum that I prepared for you, I recited the factors from the zoning ordinance that it is appropriate for the Planning Commission to consider in determining whether to grant plan approval. They are, in fact, the same factors that were cited by the opponents to the application. They come from the purpose section, and those are the items that the Commission can consider protecting residential areas and land uses from potential adverse impact of towers and telecommunications facilities, to minimize adverse visual impact of towers and telecommunications facilities through careful design, siting, landscaping, and innovative camouflaging techniques, to promote and encourage shared use and co-location of towers and antenna support structures as a primary option, rather than construction of additional single-use towers, to avoid potential damage to property caused by towers and telecommunications facilities by ensuring such structures are soundly and carefully designed, constructed, modified, to ensure that towers and telecommunication facilities are compatible with surrounding land uses, and to facilitate the provision of wireless telecommunication services to the residents and businesses in the city. In response to the request from the Commission, the staff did acquire an independent study from an engineer. This engineer was identified by staff through a telecommunications legal expert that the City of Mobile works with. So this was an independent consultant, and the consultant did utilize the materials presented, as well as providing independent confirmation from the two sources that are attached to the report.
The tower is going to be located in B3 zone.
Correct.
And if we were to approve this today in Board of Adjustments, I know it's in court now, if the court rules that they, that they can't have a variance or whatever, then this application becomes void, I suppose, right?
The tower would not be permitted.
Correct. With or without our approval today?
If the Circuit Court appeal from the decision of the Board of Zoning Adjustment is, if on that appeal it's ruled that the variance was improperly granted, yes.
Okay.
And initially, this item was held over to provide that report for our review of the report, and the report came back stating that the tower is appropriate due to the factors they reviewed.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve as per staff recommendations.
Second.
That motion has been properly made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Okay. Mr. Cameron, in understanding that you need to leave earlier. You're all right, then I won't go out of order. We'll move on to number 2. 104 North Warren Street. It's been recommended for tentative approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. That motion passes. Number 3, 450 San Emmanuel Street. Recommended for tentative approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Application number 4, 2500 and 2600 Burden Lane.
Move to approve based on staff recommendation, changing item number 5 to read on a, that they would not be allowed until a roadway meeting city standards is constructed.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that item? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 5, 3551 Alba Club Road. Recommended for tentative approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 6, 255 North Jackson Street. Recommended for tentative approval.
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 7, 5713 and 5753 Old Shell Road.
Question for the staff for clarification on the PUD. Where are our findings of facts? Am I overlooking that?
We may have neglected to place them in the report and the decisions.
Mr. Hoffman, do you have those findings of fact available?
Do y'all have those already, or? Because I can propose one if we need it.
One moment, please.
While you are looking for that, do we need to say again, comment again on the amount of parking, or is that taken care of with Mr. Dagley's comment?
Well, regarding the parking, we will need a revised PUD site plan for the file, so that would be a condition that probably needs to be added.
Okay.
But, let's see. Okay. Possible findings of fact would be that the efficient land use in that it is reusing an already developed piece of property and just making a modification to allow a drive-through, and also public services in that it would not increase any demand on existing public services that have been provided already.
So that's A and B.
Yes.
Okay. Move to approve based on staff recommendations with findings of facts A and B as listed by Mr. Hoffman. And then also, do we need to change the parking spaces just to reflect 105 parking spaces?
I would suggest that just request a revised PUD site plan for the file reflecting the change in parking.
All right, that's my motion.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 8, the east terminus of Layton Place. This has been recommended for a holdover to the September 5th meeting. I'll make that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 9, 50 Cochrane Causeway. Application for a waiver of the sidewalk has been recommended for approval.
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 10, 1643 Varner Drive, recommended for tentative approval.
Second.
If we take them together, we need to adopt the findings of fact.
Yeah. Was that for the PUD or the subdivision that we just had the motion on?
Let's just do the subdivision first.
Okay.
Would you, I'd like to ask
Who
who moved it, to move it again? Mr. Anderson?
Moved again.
Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion on the subdivision passes. The re-subdivision, Section B, which is the PUD.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations with findings of facts C and D.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Okay. Which takes us to number 11. I'm recused. Mr. Amber?
Okay.
Item number 11, north side of Spring Hill Avenue, west of Knoll Street. There's 4 items: subdivision, PUD, planning approval, and zoning. All items have been recommended for denial. Is there a motion?
Before we make a motion, now we've had the discussion, the conversation, what is staff's recommendation? Is that changed?
No, sir. Simply if the commission was moving for approval, we're planners, we had recommended conditions ready.
You said you do have,
They're ready if we decide to approve.
conditions prepared? Have those conditions been distributed?
We see.
4 pages worth of conditions if we decide to approve it. Now, has the applicant seen these conditions? No. Applicant. Would it be appropriate for okay.
Thanks. It does appear that the changes being made and some of the main issues brought up by the neighbors being drainage and traffic have certainly been taken care of. One with the traffic with one access from Spring Hill Avenue for the 2 commercial lots, and then giving a residential entrance through Lot 4 to the residential single-family Lot 3 seems to take care of traffic. And of course, the drainage, as we see up here all the time as a concern, is simply to be handled through permitting and their civil engineer. And I think the result with this design is going to net a better drainage situation for this area.
Of course, the subdivision and the PUD and the planning approval, that's all, we make that decision. Zoning, that's ultimately signed off on by the city council, correct?
That is correct.
That's correct.
So if we decide to approve today, it's still got to go to city council before the final approval
For the rezoning.
for zoning.
Yes. And to clarify again, they are applying for B1 with planning approval.
Okay.
And that is for the front 2 lots only. The modification offered does address the issue of Lot 3 not having legal frontage, as they are proposing the flag out to Knowles.
Now, we've addressed those flagpole lots in the past, and those have always been, in most cases, have approved those if there's other flagpole lots in the area.
I think this is a little different in that it's such a large piece of property. It's, if Lot 4 is more of an access.
The flag is a lot smaller than the pole.
Right.
Would there be any benefit to holding it over so there'd be more interface with the staff, considering we got 4 pages of conditions here, or are we beyond that point?
That's up to the commission. I mean, the flag would simply, more than likely, the southern line of Lot 3 would simply be extended over to have frontage on Knowles, and we would stipulate that it needs at least 25 feet of frontage.
The way these proposed conditions, if you decided to approve it, are written, it looks like number 3, condition number 3 under the sub, the PUD and the planning approval would just need to be reworded. Oh, she's already done it. Yeah, pretty much what she just said. I was going to just delete the 50-foot access easement, create the pole to Lot 3, that, 25 foot of frontage to Knoll for the flag, deny access to Knowles for 1 and 2. So to me, that's the only condition of what they've proposed would need to be changed to accommodate the change in the site plan that's come up today.
Yeah.
So that came up today in some phone calls I had with their legal counsel as far as why wasn't this 50-foot easement sufficient?
Right.
And then we told them that it had to be deeded access to Spring Hill, and that's when we discussed the option of the flag to,
So adding the condition of denying access from the commercial lots 1 and 2 to Knowles, and Does that suffice, or would you like additional?
Creating access to Lot 3 across Lot 4, providing 25-foot of frontage of access to Knowles.
Pardon my interruption, but we do need to keep some kind of easement between 1 and 2 since they have shared access through that easement. So it may not need to be the entire length of the lots 1 and 2. That can be to their discretion, but that still does need to remain for the shared access.
Good point.
Any further comments or questions by commissioners?
Yeah, I would just make one comment, that if this were to pass, the business is still subject to the city's noise ordinance. So if what we heard today was inaccurate at all, and there are dogs making racket, interrupting church, and bothering the neighbors, they're still subject to the noise ordinance.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
Need to take all 4 of these separate, I suppose, sub-PUD, planning and zoning.
Okay.
And on the
We can
PUD,
take them separate.
we do have findings of facts, yes, for the PUD.
All right, if we'd like to take A first, the subdivision, is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the subdivision, adding the condition of denying access for lots 1 and 2 to Knowles and creating access to lot 3 through lot 4, leaving a 25-foot access.
Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 2, the PUD. Is there a motion?
For the PUD, is that language in the subdivision sufficient, or does it need to be added to the PUD language as well? Okay. I'll move to approve the PUD based on the staff's recommendations and the findings of fact A through F. Again, adding denying access for lots 1 and 2 to Knowles, creating access to lot 3 from lot 4, and leaving a 25-foot access.
Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All those in favor of?
Aye.
Any against? Motion carries. Section C, the planning approval. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Properly moved and second. All those in favor of?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes. Item D, the zoning.
And just for clarification again on the zoning, it's recommended for B1, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And if we approve it today, then those that are opposed to it can show up at the city council meeting and make their voices heard of
Yes,
their
sir.
opposition.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Right. Move to approve zoning based on staff recommendation.
Second.
Properly moved and second. All those in favor of, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. And that will wrap up our items, and I will turn it back over to Ms. Latham.
Thank you. I'd like to state that we appreciate your patience with us today. Also like to ask if we have any further business. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
All right, BJ.